How does the community, building a community, essentially benefit the business?
A number is a number, right? And we have data that shows people operating businesses and those KPIs, what they're doing and how they're performing, so that you can look at that. Then the next question should be, well, how do I get there?
Bringing people together is one thing, but creating that trust, the trust together that you're in it for the right reasons. It's truly not a community to benefit yourself personally. That trust thing needs to be built up over time. So it needs to be a consistent approach.
I had to approach myself in social situations, and I looked at it as like a hacking challenge. So in my head, I turned it into a technical problem.
Yeah, right.
Like, how do I hack people, including myself, to make it look like I'm not introverted, because I'm going to freeze if I realize I'm in a social situation.
And we've built an awesome community where they all help and serve each other, which is one of the things I love about this industry. It's like,
Nick Moran, Associate Evangelism Director of ConnectWise, and Greg Lalle, SVP and GM at IT Nation. Cool, time. One thing that's come up a number of times when I've asked people over the last day or so about their IT Nation journey is their initial thought was, why the hell would I get together with all my competitors? That sounds stupid. Why does it work?
Well, I think you have to get over that hump. Certainly it's initial and a normal thought for anybody when you first think about it. But then when you see the shared wisdom, when you're the recipient of that goodness, right? That's when your eyes open up and you realize, as I said from day one, it's a complex world with a lot of problems, a lot of opportunities, and you simply can't do it alone. And running an MSP is a lonely business for a lot of the guys. It's your own race. You feel like you're the only person who understands the demands. You run the company a certain way.
It's lonely, right?
There's a lot, and there's a lot of people that are in the same boat. So I think some of it is just understanding and feeling comfortable with the fact that there are people that to share those experiences with. They're running the business, but then there's also people who can help you run the business better. So if you can check your ego at the door, I just say that respectfully to everybody, you're going to learn something. And so once you start uncorking the journey of learning, then it's no longer I'm giving away something. You start going, I've got to go there because I'm getting something.
Sounds like you've got to be somewhat vulnerable to get value, right? You've got to allow yourself to admit that you might need some help or you need to learn. You don't have all the answers.
Yeah, and I became part of a peer group at a time in my business and personally that I really needed some support.
Okay.
And I probably didn't know it at the time, but reflecting back on it, it was it kept me in business, and not only kept me in business, it delivered some value, but I very quickly, I'm a pretty emotional guy, and I was very vulnerable with my peers in that group. And it's amazing when you give a whole lot, how much you get in return, especially when you're not expecting it.
Yeah.
And it got me through some really hard times, and I've made a lot of lifelong friends, and I'm so passionate for this community and the people in it.
Awesome. At the end of the day, right, business needs return, right? We're all wanting to do nice things. We're wanting to help each other, but there has to be a bottom line growth happening. There has to be bottom line growth. So how does the community, building a community, essentially benefit the business, right? Like why and how do you determine attribution? Like how do you determine the return? Because ultimately, I mean, I think as a marketing player, I think it's great. It builds a lot of brand loyalty. It makes people really sort of congregate around the product. But how would you talk to other businesses that are thinking about doing the same thing? How would you say justify the spend, the effort, and how would you determine whether it's working?
I guess it's kind of what I just reflected for before, is that what do you do on Monday? We're wrapping up Friday. We're going to have a couple beers and it's all great, but you've got tons of information over the last 2.5 days. If you do nothing with it, you may remember this as a event where you met your peers and you had a good time and you can reflect on a couple keynotes and some things, right? If you've captured those learnings, if you met with other people and you've crystallized it, you've written it down, you have a plan. If you've gone to some of our sessions on benchmarking and understand what folks that are good in the business doing, so you can kind of judge yourself off of something that's neutral, that's non-emotional. A number is a number, right? And we have data that shows people operating businesses and those KPIs, what they're doing and how they're performing, so that you can look at that. Then the next question should be, well, how do I get there? Right. And that's the journey, that's the pathway we have. So I think those are the things you start, it becomes part of your life, and you have this continual improvement and continuous energy to keep looking at the business every day, every month, and to keep those plans rolling. So you see it, and you're enacting. You're an agent of change. It's not something you come to. This is something that hopefully in this experience you take back with you, and it becomes embedded into your culture and into your organization.
So that's the member perspective. What I'm interested in is like we're with First Focus, right? We've got a lot of end users for an Australian MSP. We've got 300 odd staff, and I'm heading up marketing and sales for the business. And so I think, okay, I look at what you guys have done here, and there's a really strong, there's a lot of brand loyalty, right? And there are MSPs that are more successful than they would have otherwise been because of the community you've created, which obviously then drives their success, means that ConnectWise has more services to sell, right? Like it just flows on, but it's done in a way where it's like, we're here to help you solve problems, and that will be an outcome from that, but it's not the intent. I look at our customer base and I think, would it make sense for me to try and create a community within that base where they can also, the CFOs, the CIOs, whatever, kind of do a similar thing? But what I'm really keen to get your take on is what would it take to do that successfully? And how would you know kind of if it's working, essentially? There's obviously a big cost to doing that. There's a lot of things you couldn't do, the opportunity cost of putting your effort into that. What are your thoughts?
I think it's anytime you bring people together in a persona, in a group, as an industry, whatever it is, you create that energy, right? That's the one thing you feel from here in the hallways. It's a different vibe than going at it alone. We talk about that, or independently having individual calls. So the value, we talk about, again, Bob Berg coming to IT Nation, who's co-author The Go Giver. The law of value says, deliver more value than you take, right? That's, you can get paid on things. So making a profit is not a bad thing, or in making your brand better and those things that you want to do, selling more ultimately, as long as you create more value.
Yeah.
So figure out, if you're doing that, what are the CIOs? Again, get a small group. Don't start big. Crawl, walk, run strategy in anything you do.
Cool.
And then find 2 or 3 people that just want to get together and have coffee. Don't worry about filling a room with 25 of them or 50 of them. Start with 2 or 3 people that want to engage and go buy them lunch and have a chat and say you're thinking about doing that.
Yeah.
You'll see in people's faces and their eyes if it lights up and they go, yeah or not, right? There's a lot, to me, it's a lot of the human reaction when you talk to people, if they're getting it or not, and how they engage. And that's all you need is a few to kind of start. And I would just say start slow, start with a plan, and figure out what they want, not what you want to tell them.
That's a great call.
Right.
Yeah.
And so make sure, because you want to put it together for what? You don't know because you haven't interviewed them. But what would they want if they could close their eyes? And I say this to the ISVs in there, you're leaving here on Saturday. Did you get what you want out of here? And if you could wave a magic wand and change something, what would it be? So if you're saying I'm putting the group together, what information, what value could I possibly bring you that you don't get today? And I'm seeing this, we're even doing it at the States of what we call our empire builders. I mean, their knowledge far exceeds, you guys are in that category, right? Far exceeds something institutional that we've ever had. I'm talking to, larger private equity banking houses to try to bring more value because it's exceeded our capacity to deliver.
Yeah, I mean, 2 things there for me. One is bullets and cannonballs, absolutely. And, we try and live that, but sometimes it is easy to forget. You don't have to go all in, right? So it's a good reminder. And I think the other thing there is, you're absolutely right. You're talking about what value can you give, but I've seen you really do well at seeking feedback, right? Like how can they kind of help you build the service, the solution, and kind of make sure that as you're trying to add value, you're not taking a punt on that. You're actually taking the time to do your research and have your conversations and get that in.
And I practice or try to preach. The answers are in here for myself as well, whether it be change or how to grow this event next year. The answers are all here.
Yeah.
If I'm arrogant and walk out here and think I have them, that's when you have a problem, right?
And I think Greg's hit the nail on the head. I mean, bringing people together is one thing, but creating that trust, the trust together that you're in it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And it's truly not a community or to benefit yourself personally, and that trust thing is, needs to be built up over time. So it needs to be a consistent approach, not just a one-off event. You're not going to build that trust.
Yeah,
that's the case.
It's interesting to me. You said you're an emotional guy before, and I think for you guys to be good at your role, it's quite a unique mixture of technical, like business acumen, and likability, and actual personality. What do you think makes you guys good at this? Like what's the secret sauce or special sauce? Because again, I'm going to try and copy this at some point with my own clients. So,
I think for me, I'm not naturally a very good speaker, and but I continually get pushed forward to say, hey, we want you on stage, or we want you doing this podcast, or we want you doing this video, and and I'm getting more comfortable with doing that, but there's part of it that people are doing that because I'm sort of genuine and I'm real and I'm talking from the heart and I'm not too artificially polished, very much. So, and I'm happy to, have the piss taken out of me. And
but people can also smell bullshit, right? Like if you're genuine, you need to see a little bit of rough on the diamond kind of thing. If that makes any sense.
Look, I'm a bit of an overshare as well. Yeah. I've got a bit of a story to tell from, running MSP is hard.
Yeah.
And everyone sort of gets it, but it's really hard and it takes a toll on people. And I talk about, some of, the positive side, but also a lot of the negative side that people don't generally share.
Mm.
So I think that builds a little bit of trust, and being genuine is just a big part of it.
You didn't say the word, but you both danced all around it. So to me, it's authenticity. It has to come from your heart. We talked about, again, someone's eyes lighting up. That's authentic. That reaction, those things. And the second piece for me is with the education, everything else is like you would like any colleague or someone you hire, is constant curiosity. Again, I know that I need to go out and find more knowledge for everybody here. I know I have to get better because that's what everybody wants, right? So kind of being that servant leader, making sure that that's the institution, you're where you want to be. And I think in this world, sometimes when people struggle for their why, I'm very, very fortunate that I've found where I'm at, because I wouldn't think of another job I want to do.
Brad Scow, I did not know how to pronounce your last name, but Ross Sardi told me. He's
You
my
got
boss,
it.
and
You
nailed
nailed
it.
it. Yep.
And you are the Vice President of Ecosystem Evangelism at ConnectWise.
Yeah, what is that?
Hey, that is a lot of words.
That's
a little bit of alliteration, which I like.
Yeah.
Ecosystem Evangelism. I was just saying before to Nick that our last guest, because I don't know when the order in which these things are going to be done, but Nick Moran, that evangelism was a term I used to use in my last role, and people would laugh at me, and it's very normalized here, but he said, no, it's still a stupid word. Thoughts?
Yeah, that's what we do. We are evangelists, right? Like trying to get people into the community because we think people are growing and finding success in our community. So come on in and be a part of it.
So what does an average day for you in that role look like? Like what do you do?
Yeah, let's see, another really good question. A couple primary functions. One was to add role-based peer groups. So we had owners groups and we had service exec groups, some sales groups, and then grow it internationally. So I started.
Well done.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So, one of the highlights of my career is I think this might be like my 20th trip over here.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, just
those are good numbers, by the way. Most Americans have not been to Australia 20 times.
Yeah.
So,
right. Yeah. It's like I said, it's my favorite geography coming over here, being a part of this. So anyway, came over, made a lot of good friends over here, and grew the peer groups over here. Till we handed them off to Stu Applegate, who now runs them here. Yep. Then ConnectWise bought HTG, rebranded the HTG peer groups as the Evolve Community. So now it's a long story, but now
you're the guest. This is what you do.
Right.
Yeah.
So now my role is historically what I've been fairly good at is recognizing patterns and trends, and I guess thinking 18 months to 2 years down the line.
Okay.
And what do we need to have in place to help partners be successful then?
Yeah, well, I'm going to make a note to ask you what 2 years down the line looks like now. But keep going.
I love it's where I live. I love talking about that stuff. So, so my role now is to continue to evangelize, right? Like I take all the learnings that we've learned over that kind of 20 plus year journey of where do partners get stuck? How do you get unstuck? What are the kind of key building blocks that will help you continue to grow your business? We built a number of models of buckets of growth. Like if somebody came to me and said, describe your industry right now, I would say, well, the businesses that are in it, you got those that are under $1 million that are in a street fight to just try to survive, right? Like they're trying to get to $1 million in service revenue.
And you lose one client with that kind of revenue.
Yeah, right. Or you hire one person and it's like a major investment, right? Like it's really hard.
Nick told me I have to ask you about being an introvert in a role that's fundamentally extroverted in its aim. Yeah. Talk to me about how you overcame that.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I still don't know that I've overcome it.
Okay. All right.
If I go way back, I mean, I was an introvert, right? And I think it's why I got into I think it's why a lot of people are introverted and get into technology. Mm-hmm. When I remember growing up, it was easier for me to find engagement and entertainment and interaction using, like, my dad was a school teacher and he brought home an Apple IIe. I'm telling way back, right? And like I could could play games on that thing. I could program that thing. It became fascinating to me. And that was for me, a more comfortable spot to put my time and energy than the awkwardness of sort of social situations, right?
Yeah.
And I think with all the technology that came out and then being an introvert, it was easy for me to sort of bury myself in I'm going to do that, right?
Yeah.
But then as I got involved in business, I realized, and I'm driven to be sort of be successful as well. I realized that you can't, unless you're just going to code in your basement, you have to learn how to interact with people, right? So for me, and again, I'm just sort of wired different. I looked at it like I figured out sort of how to hack computers, right? I mean, I would play around with in the early days of computers, like it was called hack. Like you'd take the disks that you would stick in there, and if you could get in and sort of edit a few bits and bytes on those disks, you could make the computer behave different, like hack your way into it, make it do something it wasn't supposed to do.
Okay.
So I had to approach myself in social situations, and I looked at it as like a hacking challenge. So in my head, I turned it into a technical problem.
Yeah, right.
Like, how do I hack people, including myself, to make it look like I'm not introverted? Because like I'm gonna freeze. I'm gonna freeze if I realize I'm in a social situation. Right. So I figured. So I went with, how can I hack this so that I'm always looking at it like, if I try this, what's the response I'm going to get? If I try that, what's the response? Right. So I even now, right, like in the weird little wrapper in my head, I am looking at this interaction as like, if I push these 3 buttons, what kind of a response am I going to get? And I've just looked at it that way long enough that I still don't know that I'm ever really socially interacting. I'm just trying to hack situations.
You're programming a conversation, essentially.
Exactly.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. And then I
what's it like overthinking all the time?
It's
exhausting.
It's exhausting.
Yeah, it would be.
Well, because so it's funny. I've gotten fairly effective at public speaking because through the things that I've learned, and I relate to introverts, so they relate to me. In fact, I don't do it so much anymore, but when I would start my larger engagements of public speaking in front of technical people, I would just talk about how I don't like people. They're messy. They're the problem. I know because I am one. You know, like it's right. It's like, gosh. Like if I could not interact with people ever again, I'd probably be just fine with that. Sure. Right? I know. I realize I'm odd.
Right?
Not taken. Yeah. Well, but what's funny is you'd be surprised, especially in this industry, if I say like after that they're a bit taken aback, and then they realize I'm joking. I think there's way more people that relate to that way of thinking, and if I get that out on the table, what it allows me to be is this sort of almost invisible person that is like they can hear what I'm saying because they realize, so they're half watching. I would call it like my brokenness as a human being as I present, but they can hear what I'm saying because I'm usually able to kind of resonate with some kind of an emotion or feeling that they've had before.
Yeah.
And I'll help them kind of look, this is how I walked through that.
I think you've got an extremely high level of self-awareness and introspection, probably mirrored with vulnerability and authenticity. And I think you wrap all that together and you become very relatable. Yeah. And I think particularly in this audience as well, I would say. Yeah. But I think what you're talking about there too, just you could bury yourself in a world of tech, I guess, and choose not to interact with people. And I agree that people are typically the cause of, or the catalyst that has led to both our best and worst experiences in life. So it's a pretty mixed bag. Yeah. But you can either be a direct contributor and do exactly what you said was an option, just go deep into that tech world, and you'll earn a fair amount of money, but you won't have your career. Yeah. And so you're right. It's people skills, soft skills. They're so unbelievably important, but they are bloody difficult and they're not repeatable.
Right. And then what I really learned, and this is sort of where it sort of turned around, and I have a good friend, Dr. Larry Little, he's got his own version of the personality test that really resonated well with me, and he talked to me, he's coached me a lot on this, but I learned that I don't like the concept of people, but I love individual people, right? Okay. So like Nick's become a really good friend of mine. Yeah. Right. And like if you show that vulnerability when you're speaking, and this is what I love about, I think about coming over here. You guys have that whole tall poppy syndrome thing, right?
Massive.
Yeah, and like that's the thing that I cringe about in North America, right? It's like I don't get.
Everyone just
I don't
is so confident and talk about how great they are. Yeah.
I don't understand it, right? Like I don't think that way. But then I come over here and I'm like, they're my people. Like
everyone's very humble, but it's actually that can be negative too. If Ross, you know Ross Sardi,
I do, yeah.
If he was here, he would tell you that my biggest work on is to stop being self-deprecating, because I feel like it puts people at ease or will make them not think that I'm up myself. So even I started a presentation to our technical account managers the other day by going, I'm fully aware that everyone in this room knows more than me technically, and some of you will know more than me from a business perspective. And like, why did I start with that? Because I don't want them to hate me. You know?
Right.
It's just anyway.
I know there's in that vein there's a future version of me that is much better at navigating the insecurities without having to admit every one of them.
Right. Yeah. Maybe don't make them everyone else's problem. Just bury them deep. Bury them deep.
Right.
Time. Well, Wayne Small, CEO, SMB IT Professionals. Thank you for helping me kick off day 2 of IT Nation Sydney. Oh, that's right. You ran the Microsoft server user groups, didn't you?
That's right.
Yes, I remember now.
Stu Applegate, who works at ConnectWise and IT Nation, Dean Calvert, and myself, and a couple of others, we started user groups here in Australia that were really MSP groups.
Right.
And it's got its seeds from that. And it was a lot of community sharing where members would stand up and share the problems that they had and the solutions that they found. And so it was really good. It was really good in the way in which people were happy to share not just the problems, but how they fixed them and go into deep dive onto that. And that really was beneficial for everybody.
All right. So your members are based all across Australia?
That's right.
Not New Zealand at this point?
Yeah, we've got some in New Zealand too.
Cool.
We're actually looking to start a New Zealand chapter.
Okay.
But what we do is we have monthly face-to-face meetings. And that's one of the things that sets us apart from other groups, is we actually get in a room, we hear from some sponsors, we have a bite to eat, a drink, share the problems that we're having, and we can actually, grow because of that.
Right.
So we want to start something in New Zealand, but we've got a couple of people in Auckland, a couple of people in Wellington, a couple of people in Christchurch. So a little hard to get them together face to face. So
it's not a big country, but there's still some distance between those cities.
Yes.
It's funny though, like talking about community. I think we had, we definitely had Ryan Fuzzy. He kicked off yesterday, and you and him were in business together back in the day.
That's right.
And then we had Hosted Network here with us as well briefly, and I know they are a supporter of SMB IT Professionals.
Yes.
It's just. Everyone knows everyone to a greater or lesser degree at this thing, and it seems that everyone I've spoken to has been involved for the better part of a decade or longer. It's cool. Obviously, a very strong connection.
It's a small world, but it's very well connected.
All right. Well, Nigel Moore, Tech Tribe. Amazing you're here. First time in 4 years at 19 Nation events, is that right?
It's the first time at an MSP event in 4 years, any MSP event.
Which is crazy to me because that's your market, that's your target market.
I only have 4,500 of them as clients. I don't go to events very often.
I guess you don't need to be at the events because you're growing that fast anyway.
True, that's probably half of it. The other half is I'm an IT guy. I like sitting behind the scenes and introverted and have my
Ross
desk.
Can relate.
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Time.
We've got about 4,500 MSPs around the world in there that we teach and coach and help and support. And we've built an awesome community where they all help and serve each other, which is one of the things I love about this industry is MSPs, they're not competitive against each other. Like we help each other more than we compete against each other in our space. And so we're a little part of that. And that's it.
Time.
Introversion, defaultness to geeky technical stuff versus focusing on growth and marketing stuff is prevalent in our industries because it's who we are. We're geeks at heart, and often geeks are introverts. We like sitting behind the tech and understanding the latest tools and whatnot, and
don't like being rejected. The fear of
100%.
no, right?
Fear of failure,
Does anyone like
rejection
being
is
rejected?
rife.
No one does.
Just
say no. Just say no.
Yeah, no one loves it, but I think people can handle it differently.
Correct. And I think if you cycle it even further back than that, when we're all kids, like our industry, we're the ones that were picked on in school, right? Like we're the ones that were constantly rejected from the cool groups and constantly rejected from things. And so I think that pervasiveness, fear of rejection lives on and kind of shows up in that growing a business and marketing and sales and growth and all that sort of stuff. And even leadership of a team, like going and building a team and trying to get past that or overcome those confidence barriers that a lot of us had from those environments that we're in our earlier years of being the nerd, the introverted nerd that everybody picked on and wasn't part of the cool groups. And and whatnot. But as those memes say, like the nerds are the ones that ended up inheriting the earth. And
I'm just thinking of like when Bill Gates came in and like ruined Homer's hyper coffee meganet, whatever it was, that thing. Like nerds. Don't worry, that's a sidebar. Well, don't worry about that. Simpsons reference fell flat. I was going to say we were having a conversation.